I'm Claire, and I'm actually quite glad that we've got unpacked because suddenly everything's on Zoom. So I've got my nice little plant and a picture up. So I feel like I've, except there is a pile of rubbish and things that we've unpacked next to me. So we're settling in, and yeah, I'm really excited to be talking to you all this morning. Kirsty, could you pop the PowerPoint up for me? I'm going to talk through some slides, so you have a choice on your screen to kind of make me big and the PowerPoint small, or you can swap it the other way around, whatever makes it easier for you to kind of follow. I'm going to be talking about slowing and slowing down, and I don't know about you, but in my mind sometimes I'm looking at the clock and I'm thinking, oh, how much longer is church going to be, you know, oh, I need to get the lunch on. So I'd just like you, if you've got any thoughts like that, and this is for myself as well, that you just kind of put them to one side and just take a deep breath and know that God wants us to hear these words. And yeah, I've been listening to him lots this week, and I really pray that as I speak, you hear God speaking into your individual situation. So next slide, please, Kirsty. Thank you. So a bit about me. As Richard's already said, we live in Bath, and I've actually been in Bath since I was 11, apart from going off to university. And I don't know, probably some of you would know that I was brought up in a Christian household. My mum and dad kind of came to faith at university age, and so brought us, you know, along going to church. And at about 13, I kind of really decided to follow Jesus for myself. And I put this picture up because I've been learning lots about my identity over the last kind of year or so, particularly. And I really feel strongly that it's been a roller coaster, an absolute roller coaster. We are foster carers, and we fostered a lad through his teenage years, and that has been loads of ups and downs. And also we've had our first birth child, Asher, and that, of course, as those of you who've had children know, is a real roller coaster of kind of emotions. And so I think this picture sums up quite well how life has been over the last year or so. But I keep coming back to this phrase, daughter of God. That's my identity, and we are children of God, and we wear all these different hats and do all these different things, but actually at the centre I am loved by God. I'm part of his family, and I'm his daughter. So I'm actually quite excited at the moment. I feel like there's a wider sense of excitement within the church in terms of missional communities, but also I feel like personally God's really kind of changing a couple of things in my life individually, but leading me on to something that is going to be quite exciting. So yeah, we're going to talk about the book. If you could do the next slide, please, Kirsty. Thank you. So for those of you who've been with us, this is the kind of journey we've taken through our talks over the last month or so. Richard spoke about the problem that John Mark Comer talks about in this book, this idea that we're sort of fast-paced in society and we hurry everywhere. And then Jenny brought us a talk that said the solution is to come to Jesus, to follow his way and to be an apprentice under him. And then Chris and Dan looked at the spiritual disciplines of silence and solitude and Sabbath. And now we're kind of looking at slowing. And if you've missed any of these, then you can go and look at the church YouTube channel to watch them. So if you open the book at this chapter, as some of you who've got the copy will, it starts talking about rules and having a plan. So that's quite good, because that's kind of me, down to a T. I love rules and I love a sort of plan. I like to know what's going on. But as we go into this a bit more, hopefully you'll see that it's not just about that. There's much more to it. Next slide, please, Kirsty. So as I read the chapter, I kept thinking, what's made me slow down in my life? Now, these two lovely pictures on the left are the two things that came to mind. One is Asher, who is 18 months old, and the other is Max, our 13-year-old Labrador. Now, he's mostly like this most of the day. He's very slow, walks along sniffing every blade of grass. And in the same way, Asher is fascinated by every little detail. So if you ever want to get a chance to slow down, you're welcome to take Max out for a walk to help you slow down if you want to. Could you do the next slide, Kirsty? I've got a little video here of Asher, just to show you from his point of view how he kind of lives life a bit differently. So watch it and have a think, what does he do differently to us? So as you can see, we were trying to walk to the left and he decided to turn around and walk back the other way. And he is just fascinated by hearing things, looking at what's going on. I think he had a little bit of bark in his hands that he was looking at. And I think for me, it just shows me that for him, life isn't fast yet, in a sense. He's in a very unhurried place. And for us, we're all different. We all have a different kind of stage of life that we're at. And we have things that make us go fast. So it might be your job, it might be your family, it might be sort of society or neighborhood, like where you are, you find that life is particularly fast. But then we do also have things that make us slow down, whether that's your broadband speed or lockdown, or whether maybe you've recently retired, or you're facing a period of illness where you have to rest and you can't do as much. So whatever stage you are at, we're all different. That's something to remember with this talk particularly. Next slide, please, Kirsty. So I was still thinking, my life at the moment, I look after Asher 4 days a week and I work 1 day. And actually I have a lot of time, to be honest. Asher and I can just go for a walk. It doesn't matter if we're a little bit longer than we need to be. But I did notice over the last few weeks as I was reflecting about slowing that I still hurry. So I don't know if you've noticed this, that even if you have a day when perhaps there's not much happening, you still hurry to be efficient. You still feel like you've got to make the most of every moment. And Luke and I like watching a TV show called Scorpion, and the lead character, Walter, is like a genius who can solve any problem that's facing the world. But he often misses the kind of emotions of the people around him. Like he can often be quite rude, and he kind of forgets to think about other people. And I think, although this is an extreme sort of example, perhaps we fall into that same trap. We're so focused on sorting something out or getting the job done that we actually miss maybe the opportunities that God's put around us. So next slide, please, Kirsty. So I want you to just take a little moment to consider these questions. How hurried are you at the moment? Do you ever get a chance to slow down or to take life at a different pace? Or maybe you're sitting there and you're feeling the complete opposite and you're feeling like life feels too slow and you want restrictions to be lifted so you can get out and do stuff and get back to normal. We're all in a different point. And I think today I'd just love God to speak into your specific circumstance. What is it that God would like to speak to you today about? Which part of your life? And I remember Richard's first talk about the problem with hurry. And the key point is that the fast pace of life, the way we can do things so quickly in this world, means that we often miss the joy of God or the presence of God. I've got this little card in my kitchen. It's from Hannah Bridewell, and it says, "Joy is the serious business of heaven." It's a quote by C.S. Lewis. And I keep it up because I can be quite a serious person sometimes. I'm quite focused on getting dinner cooked or whatever it is, the washing done. And Luke and Asher are brilliant at making me laugh, Luke particularly. And sometimes I'm so focused on what I'm doing that I actually miss the joy of that moment. So I really like this quote as a way of reminding me, actually, joy is part of God's kind of work on earth. So let's continue to look into the Bible. Next slide, please, Kirsty. Let's think about a few verses that will help us with this idea of slowing. Obviously, Psalm 46, verse 10 comes to mind. "Be still and know that I am God." And it's a command. It says, "Be still." I like that God perhaps knows that we like to rush and get lots of things done and be busy and move around and be restless. So he's commanding us to be still. There was a lovely moment in the holiday club summer before last, and when we asked all the children to lie down on the floor. There was lots of space in the church, and they just had a chance to kind of sit and be still, lie down, and we asked them to just soak in God's presence. I said a little prayer over, and then we just left some quiet time. And it was incredible to think that God was meeting with each of those children individually in that chance to be still. And it's the same for us. We know that Jesus took himself away to pray and to be silent, and we know that he was unhurried. There are plenty of stories where he didn't rush to go and see someone who was sick or ill quickly. If you think of Lazarus and Jairus' daughter, he was sort of caught up on the way to them with other things. And when we read those stories, we can perhaps think a bit like the disciples did or others, oh, he should have gone quickly and he should have gone to that person. But he knew the will of his Father, and he knew what was happening. There's a song that you may have come across called Be Still by Hillsong. And it starts with the line, be still and know that the Lord is in control. I particularly like the ending of that about being in control, because I feel like as I've learned more about myself since having Asher and the COVID pandemic, that I have really become someone who needs to control what's going on. You might recognize this in your life as well, or you might be different to me. But I found I really need to know what's happening to feel okay. But actually, I feel quite challenged lately to relinquish that control to God. And I think a key part of this is slowing. We're submitting our lives to God to go at his pace, not ours, and not with our striving, but to follow his lead. And then I've just put that line up there. If we slow, we will be more aware of his voice and his presence with us. Then we can taste and see that the Lord is good. A bit like Miriam said when she went for a walk, she then sort of spotted more of the joy of God when you're out and about. So it's important that we slow down to take stock and to be able to spend time with God. If you could just go to the next slide, please, Kirsty. So what is slowing? Well, one of the ways it's defined in the book is cultivating patience by deliberately choosing to place ourselves in positions where we simply have to wait. So we're going to look at some kind of situations and practical ideas of where you might do that. But the key thing I want you to remember is that we do need to slow down so we don't miss the opportunities God provides. If you think about sometimes you might have a conversation quickly with someone in a shop or on the street, and sometimes we perhaps hurry on because it feels a bit uncomfortable or we feel out of our depth. Yesterday I was walking to the shop quite late at night, and a guy asked me for some money, and I felt uncomfortable, and I didn't stop, and I didn't give him any money. I wasn't sure. And I'm not saying that we necessarily need to change everything we do, but there is a point that God is, are we interruptible? Is our schedule, what we're doing, too important that we can't be interrupted? So if you go to the next slide, the key question is, how would Jesus live your life? So Jesus wasn't in the 21st century. He didn't have a smartphone, he didn't have a car, didn't have a family in the sense of children. He did have a family of disciples. So the things that we're going to talk about, the practical ideas, are not really spiritual disciplines, but Jesus did live a life that was unhurried. So if he was in your shoes, in your situation, with your job and your house and your family, how would he live your life? Next slide, please. So we're going to look at some practical ideas, but they are just ideas. Please don't take them as the only things. You might tweak them slightly. You might pick something quite different. This is obviously what John Mark Comer wrote about in his book, and I've picked a couple of others that I've thought of. But they are relevant to the situation that I'm in or that he was in. So for you and your life, there might be something a bit different, or they might be the same. The key thing is we want to align our schedule to our values. So if we think something is important in life, and we've been learning so much about rest and Sabbath and spending time with God, if that's important to us, then actually our schedule, what we do in the day, should reflect that. And I think that means that actually, if we want to follow Jesus, then our lives are going to look different. They are going to be not conforming to the pattern of this world. There will be a different path for us. And I think something that John Mark Comer says in the book is that otherwise, if we don't plan our life, in line with God, then we end up being reactive instead of proactive. So we kind of react to what's happening to us rather than kind of deciding the way that God wants us to live our life and following in his way. If you think of Jesus, he was always in line with the Father. He knew the Father's will, and he kind of followed that. So here are some ideas. Remember, they're just ideas, and my advice is start with one, or pick one thing to change. Next slide, please, Kirsty. So drive the speed limit. Sounds really simple. It's a great way to slow yourself down. Maybe pray in the car. Maybe look around and see God's beauty in the people around you and the nature that you see. Don't use your phone in the car. It is illegal, and obviously we have to kind of recognize that our phones are a bit of an addiction. They do give us a dopamine hit, if you like. There's an emotion sometimes associated with wanting to see what the latest thing is or a message. So don't use your phone in the car. Show up early to appointments without your phone. Maybe you can pray for the people that you're nearby, or just take that time to be with God. And this last one, you might be looking at thinking, oh my goodness, I would never do this. And I was in Lidl yesterday and I bottled it. I didn't do this. Choose the longest queue at the supermarket. It feels so inefficient, but maybe it's a little way that you could take the time to kind of check in with yourself and with God. There's a great line on the Lectio 365 app, which is a great little prayer app, that says, recenter your scattered senses on the presence of God. So it might be that you just spend that time in the longest queue thinking about what God's saying to you. Bring your senses back to him. Next slide, please. And there's kind of a deeper motivation here to all of these perhaps quite small ideas or practical things. John Mark Comer says, it's wise to regularly deny ourselves from getting what we want, whether through a practice as intense as fasting or as minor as picking the longest queue. That way, when somebody else denies us from getting what we want, we don't respond with anger. We don't have to get our way to be happy. Now, I don't know if you've ever spent much time in a kitchen with a toddler, but that's how a lot of my days are spent at the moment. And this is something that Asher is learning a huge amount about denying himself what he really wants to do. So if he had his way in our kitchen, he would open every cupboard that we've just filled, and he would probably line up all the plates and cups on the floor. Now, we all know how important it is for him to learn that he can't do that, that's not kind of okay. But I'm wondering if, as adults, and as for myself, I'm wondering if I've forgotten this for myself. As an adult who is now in control of her life, have I forgotten to submit to Christ? Would I be able to give up some of the things I enjoy to focus on God, whether that's food or my phone or sleep? And Habila prayed something this morning about denying our pleasures and not seeking the pleasures that we want, but really following God's will. So I think that was really interesting that tied in. Next slide, please. Now, apologies if you don't have a smartphone about this, but I am going to talk about phones for a bit, because I think for those of us who do have a smartphone, this is a really important issue. So a couple of ideas that are mentioned in the book: turn off notifications. I did this week. I turned it off on my email, so it doesn't come up with a little red number to tell me how many emails I have new. I have to click on the mail app to check my email. I found it really helpful, actually. It was really good. I found myself not looking at my phone as much. Another idea he suggests is clear your home screen, so make it much less cluttered, delete anything you don't really use, put things to another page, have set times to check your email or your social media, etc. And leave it in one place in your house. This is a great one. I I've started doing this a lot more, and I find it really helps keep me kind of feeling less checking my phone all the time. So I plug it in, put it in one corner in the kitchen, and just try and keep it there. He also says you should parent your phone. So put it to bed earlier than you and let it have a lie in, so that it's not the first thing that you see in the morning. Next slide, please, Kirsty. Now, this is tricky. So some of you are probably sitting there thinking, there's no way I could, give up my phone. John Mark Comer actually says in the book that maybe you should just get rid of your phone or turn it into a dumb phone where you take everything off in terms of internet capabilities. But I would like you to think about finding a solution that works for you. So for us, we're foster carers, and that does mean that we do need to be kind of available at all sorts of hours. We have had phone calls in the night, and sometimes emails do need a quick response. But we've kind of talked about ways that we could limit this. So for example, like getting a landline, so that we know that someone could get in touch with us, even if our phone battery had died or we weren't near our phones. And I think whatever you decide to do, it's just important to make sure you do something so that your phone isn't ruling you. So we don't want to let our phones set your emotional equilibrium and your view of the world. Sometimes we feel better if we've had a message from someone, or we feel disappointed if we haven't heard from anyone. But really, it's prayer that should be setting that emotional equilibrium, and the Bible should be setting our view of the world. And it's all about not getting sucked into the hurry and the sort of anxiety and outrage of this world. Next slide, please. So a couple of other ideas you might like to try. Kill your TV, as in get rid of some of your TV time. We're currently trying alternate nights. And it's important to remember what you watch influences you, and it does affect you, so choose carefully. Single task, we have some really steep steps in our new house, twisty kind of stairs. So every time I'm coming down them at the moment, I'm thinking, just focus on not falling down the stairs. But this is really important because there's a quote that says, multitasking is the drive to be more than we are, to control more than we do, to extend our power and our effectiveness. Such practice yields a divided self with full attention given to nothing. Now, I find this really hard because I'm definitely a multitasker. I'd love to try and think, okay, well, I'm going upstairs, I'll pick up that toy on the way, and then I'll get the washing, and on my way back down, I'll pick up that. But actually, I think sometimes this means that I'm missing out on really focusing on one thing. Am I ever fully present to the thing that I'm actually doing or the thing that's happening? So I'd really encourage you to think single task. Because when we do one thing, we often do it better, and we can do it well. You can walk slower, come and take Max for a walk if you want to, and try and find a regular time for silence and solitude. Now, these are all different ideas. You obviously don't have to do them all. And it might be that you already have a pattern where you have a regular time to be quiet with God. And it might be that once a month you do a longer sort of time with God, go for a walk by yourself or something like that. Next slide, please, Kirsty. So a few things I've tried. I've been thinking about trying to live more sustainably, and Chris is going to be talking a bit about simplicity next week, and this comes into that a bit. It's helped me to not think, oh, I just buy a new thing, I need that, or I need that one, that specific thing. We've been enjoying putting things in our new house from our old house and sort of finding, repurposed places for them, trying to use up secondhand things or keep things rather than throwing them away. So that's really helping me to focus on the value of everything we have rather than needing something else. Accepting what's happening in the moment might be tricky, but if you want to come and watch Asher, it's brilliant because he absorbs so much at the moment. He's so interested in the little details. So I use him as that's my one to help kind of try and accept what's happening at that point. What is he learning? What's he looking at? And it helps me to slow my kind of heart and my mind so that I'm seeing the joy at which he sees in the world. And a quiet time first thing in the morning, I'm getting up before Asher, and that's working really well for me at the moment. It sets my day up really well. When he was younger, I couldn't do this and I didn't do it very well, but I did kind of make a point of when he goes down for a nap, I will have my quiet time. So it's about kind of finding what works for you at the stage that your life is at. And next slide, please, Kirsty. Don't worry, I'm nearly done. I know it's been quite a long service this morning. So I read this the other day, and I just think it makes so much sense with this kind of message. It's from Mark chapter 8, 34 to 36. Jesus said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul?" Next slide, please, Kirsty. So as you kind of take stock of everything that I've shared this morning, I just think, these are just ideas, but I'd really encourage you to do something to make a little change in your life. Take a look at your life with God. Ask him what he wants you to change. If life is hard, which for many of us it is, then take this to God. Tell him what's hard. And then pick one little change. This picture at the bottom shows that a 1 degree shift is kind of tiny at the point that you make it, but actually the influence of that change is huge. So I'd really encourage you to kind of try and make a little change. And what I've noticed is that as I've made a little change, I've been more spurred on the next week or the next kind of bit of time to make another change. And I was listening to God this week for this talk, and I just found him sort of saying the phrase, "Find your rest and be present in the moment." So I hope that's been helpful for you, and that you can take some time with God this week to think about how you can slow down with him and focus on his presence. Amen.